Inspiring interviews with today's top landlords. This is the Rental Income Podcast. And now, Dan Lane.
Tom, what's the population of your town?
I would say right south of about 5,000 people.
Let me get right to the point here. So, can you actually make money investing in rental properties in a small town?
Yes, 100% you can make money. I think it depends on what you want. If you want appreciation, cash flow, or like I said, the golden nugget, which is both of those. But yes, it can definitely be done in a small town.
One of the advantages that I think you have as a small town rental property investor is that I would imagine the prices are probably pretty cheap. Am I right?
Yes, for sure. The cheapest house I ever bought was like $7,000. I followed that up with a $7,500 house. I actually bought a $10,000 house. And until recently, my most expensive house was $77,000. And I thought that was crazy to buy for a house.
That is pretty incredible. So what do you think are the biggest disadvantages to buying in a small town?
I think some of the disadvantages is, rent's not really going to go up a whole bunch because it's just the location and the jobs and how much salary is going up in this area. So that would be a disadvantage. Also appreciation, like I said, I don't think until this recent 2 years, appreciation has gone crazy. It just doesn't go up a whole lot in this town, or I think other small towns. So I think that's another disadvantage.
When you're buying properties for as cheap as Tom is, I don't see how you can end up making a lot of money, but we're going to find out exactly what Tom has going on. We'll take a look at his portfolio. We'll go over all of his numbers, and we'll also take a look at buying properties from a sheriff's sale. Tom has bought a few properties this way. We'll talk about how the process works and what he's learned by going through this experience. Joining us on the show today from New Lexington, Ohio, is Tom McGreevy. We'll take a really quick break to thank our sponsors. We'll come right back and we'll talk to Tom. It's a lot of work to find a really good rental property. And when you actually find that property, you want to make sure you're working with a lender that can get that loan closed. The lender that I recommend is Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. She's a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more or you're ready to get started today, just go to ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com. NMLS 42056.
Rental Income Podcast.
Tom, so the first thing I'm thinking is that in a small town of only 5,000 people, I feel like it might be hard to find tenants. Like, do you have a difficult time ever filling one of your rentals?
I really don't, because in a small town and you have your family, people kind of know everyone and they know their kids, they know grandkids. And so with the school system, there's only one here in town. And my wife being an educator, like, we kind of know the families. And to be honest, I don't have a big turnover rate. So when I do buy a new house, I do have to find a new tenant. And it's just kind of word of mouth, and I put it out there and see who applies.
Is employment kind of limited? I just think when there's not a lot of people, there's probably not a lot of jobs. So is there like a big employer in town, or like where do your tenants generally work?
Yeah, we have a few big employers here in town. And you got your normal restaurants and grocery stores and things like that. But we do have a large population that will drive, 30 to an hour to find their employment. So you do run into that issue.
Do you ever have problems finding contractors or people to do work for you?
No, I think once, I've been doing this for 14 years. So you make your connections, and if they're good, they're good, and you keep them on your speed dial. And as long as you treat them right, and I have a good list of people that I can call when I need plumbing or heating or electrical, and just get that repaired for my tenants.
Is it the kind of thing where there's like one plumber in town or one HVAC guy, or do you have multiple people you can call on?
Yeah, for the most part, there's usually a couple of each, not too many. I do think we see a trend of some people getting to the retirement age, and we got to fill those gaps. But there are a lot of handymen out there that know different parts of different things about the house.
Now, as far as the benefits of investing in a small town, I mean, some of those numbers you gave at the beginning of the podcast are incredible. So, I mean, you're really buying properties for a few $1,000s?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say it happens all the time. And, I've been doing this for 14 years, so I think prices have gone up. But yeah, you can definitely find deals out there. And like I said, the sheriff's sale was one of them where they offered it at a very discounted price. And I was able to jump on that and take that opportunity down.
So if you were looking to buy a property today, could you go on the MLS and buy a property for $10,000?
I don't think so right now in this type of environment. The numbers have went up. So, maybe a $10,000 house now might be $30,000 or $40,000.
Okay.
The other day, just one listed that was pretty cheap. And, you could definitely get the 1% rule and rent out of that right away. And it's on the MLS right now.
So for some of those properties that you were talking about, like I think you said you bought a property for, was it $7,000?
Yes.
So like, what is that? What does that property rent for?
So I think back in the day, I probably rented it for probably $600 a month, but currently I'm getting about $800 out of that place.
Wow.
So it's pretty nice.
That's a ridiculous return. Like it's like you've got all your money back in like basically a year.
Yeah, and so it's a great return. Don't get me wrong, but on the scale of things, I always look to it's a small number, So like it's a great return on $7,000. But could I get that same return on something that costs $70,000, and that would be a higher, return rate?
Now, what about if you needed to sell? Because I imagine you have a small town. There's not a lot of people, so there's probably not a lot of buyers. Do houses just sit forever, or do they take a long time to sell?
You have your ups and downs in these markets. Currently, everything's going crazy, so it doesn't take very long to sell. And actually, I'm getting ready to list one of my rentals for sale, and maybe we can talk about that later. But so I don't expect it to be on the market long because the normal is like 30 days and then a price drop. But in today's rate, it's like a price drop if it doesn't sell within 5 days because people are like, why isn't it selling? They just get used to like what we're going through right now.
And I'm just picturing this as like a small town where, it's just a lot of good, hardworking people. Like, is it a safe area, or are there dangerous parts of town or parts you want to stay away from?
No, that's the other thing that I laugh about sometimes. My town is safe. It's awesome. Great people, hardworking people. And sometimes when I talk to other realtors, and they always talk about, well, when you sell a house, you got to know what school district it's in. Well, there's only one school district here, right?
Right.
So there's some things that you don't even look at when you're buying a house in this town. So no, it's very safe. It's a great community.
Now, I imagine at this price point, there's probably not much financing. Like you've probably got to be a cash buyer. Is that right?
Yeah, and maybe there is a product out there. But in my past history, it's always been a cash offer.
So how have you been able to buy rental properties? Are you saving up cash, or do you have some other way to finance the purchases?
So I have to say this. I have great parents. My dad recently passed away, but they helped me a lot. I remember I wanted to buy my first property when I came back from Los Angeles. And it was in 2008. It was a perfect time to get started. And I didn't have any money because I was just out of college and, subbing in the school. So my dad loaned me some money to buy this property. It was like $24,000. And so I paid him back over the next couple of years with the rent that I would make from that property.
Okay.
And then slowly I would take out HELOCs on all my other properties and use that cash to buy more to fund this machine to keep buying.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you've been able to get lines of credit. So as you've gotten properties paid off, you've been able to open a line of credit, and then you've been able to use that equity to buy more properties.
Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
And some banks will offer on rental properties, home equities, and some might not. So you just have to check out different lenders.
Sure. Well, tell me about your portfolio. What does your portfolio look like?
So currently today I have 13 long-term rentals, and I just bought my very first short-term rental in December. And I put an offer on a house yesterday, and I just learned that I did not get the offer. So I'm pretty bummed about that.
What was your offer?
It was on another for my second short-term rental.
Okay.
And I was very, very excited about it. And that's the ups and downs of real estate. So you win some and you lose some.
So in this small town, do you get people that are looking to stay at an Airbnb? Like, is that a thing, or are people coming to vacation in your town?
Yeah. So this is near a national park.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. That makes sense. How far away is it from where you live?
It's about 3 hours. So it's not bad to go and vacation. And that's the nice thing about the short-term rentals. You can also use it yourself. And that's, kind of the point of it.
Sure. All right. So now in your small town, like, have you bought all of your properties off the MLS, or have you used other methods to find properties?
Yeah, so I bought 3 of them at the county sheriff's sale. That's at the courthouse. I bought a few more off of an online website, like an auction.com type thing, or HUD home stores. And then the rest have all came off the MLS.
Now, when you're buying a sheriff's sale, can you see the property before you buy it?
Kind of. So when I look for a sheriff, well, I'm not really looking for a sheriff's sale, but I used to go out for like a Saturday or Sunday morning drive, and I didn't know it was like term driving for dollars. That's what I just did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would look for houses that have tall grass, no blinds, no one living there. I knew it was a foreclosure, and between 2008 and say 2017, there was a lot of foreclosures around. So you can kind of see them coming. And most likely you can't get into it, but you can look in the windows and kind of peek around, especially if no one's living there. You want to make sure no one's living there.
Sure. Okay. All right. So before you bid on the property, you kind of looked through the window, you kind of had a feel for what the condition of the property was?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there's been maybe a couple times where a window is open. So that is an opportunity, but you want to be careful and not like get in trouble and trespass,
Sure.
But the other thing you want to make sure is you look for liens on the property. So you can have like a title company look and make sure you're not going to inherit any liens with this, because sometimes, most of the time, I think you buy it as is. And,
that's a good
so
point.
That kind of is scary.
That's a good point. And something definitely people should look at, that if you buy a property at a sheriff's sale, there could be liens that go with the property. So, you might think you're getting a really good deal, but if you have a $50,000 lien, you might not have as good a deal as you think you do.
Yeah.
Well, let's walk through the process real quick. So when you went to the sheriff's sale, is this like at the courthouse steps kind of thing?
Yep. And every county is going to be different. So you might do it once a week at a certain time, and it's definitely on the courthouse steps where I'm from, and it starts at a certain time. It depends on the number of properties being sold and how popular or attractive they are, how many people will show up. So there could be 3 people there, or 20 people, it just depends.
Let's talk about the property that you actually ended up buying. So what was the opening bid for this property?
So they usually start out 2/3 of the appraised value. And so it was right around $3,000.
$3,000 was the opening bid. Okay. And were there other bidders?
Yeah, there was other bidders, and he bid me up around 4,000. Then he just stepped out, so I got the house for the 7,000.
$7,000. Were you mad that you had to pay so much?
I mean, I was like, come on, like you're gonna bid me up, but at the end of the day, I had it, and now looking back, how many ever years, like 4,000, that's why you buy and hold, and it's a great thing.
All right, so. Did the property need some work? Once you got in there, did you have to do anything to fix it up?
So with this property, it was a foreclosure and they didn't winterize it in time. So the water lines, it's a crawl space. It was all busted. So I did have to hire a plumber. It was probably around $2,500 to replumb everything. And then I painted it because that's a cheap, easy skill that I can do. And it was ready to get rented out.
And there was no other damage. There's no other from the pipe breaking. It didn't cause any other damage to the property.
No, there was no mold, or the carpet was still intact. And before I bought it, it was a flip. We had a flipper in town, and he sold it, and the people lost it. So, like, it had your typical off-white walls with white trim and beige carpet. Like, it was your typical flip. So it was really nice.
All right, so $9,500 is your all-in price plus the paint and your time. What is that property rented for today?
It's around $800 a month.
Wow. And now let's talk about your expenses on this property. So I assume this is paid for, right? You don't have any debt on this property anymore?
Yeah, it was all cash offer.
All right. So what are your taxes and insurance if you're to break it down to a monthly expense?
I would say between $50 and $100 a month.
Okay. And what about repairs? Like, do things generally come up with this property? Do you generally have any repairs?
No. So one of the things that I like to do is I always set the place up to be great that I would live in that house. Like, I'm not going to rent something out that I wouldn't live in. And it's just a standard that I've lived by. And I don't know if it came from my dad or just how I was raised, but I don't want someone to live in something that I wouldn't live in, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So when I set these up, they're perfect. And unless the tenant's going to do damage or something like that, they should be fine. Now, where we live, we have old clay sewer lines. So every now and then the roots get in that sewer line and I have to call a plumber and get that cleaned out. And for this house, it was a couple years ago, I actually had to buy a new furnace.
Okay. So that's it. And how much did that cost?
I want to say about $3,000.
Okay. All right. So you've got your $800 in rent and you don't have a property manager. It sounds like you're managing the properties yourself.
Yeah. So, my dad always had 2 rentals growing up and he managed those. I think he would probably think I was crazy for having 13 now. But I still manage them. I collect rent and I take the phone calls there maybe at 10 o'clock at night that says something's broke. But for the most part, it's not too bad. All
right. So after you pay your taxes and insurance, you've got about $750 a month. Now, how do you budget for repairs? Like, do you set a certain amount of that money aside every month for when the HVAC goes or when you need a new roof or something else comes up?
Yeah, so I was really never educated, so I never really set aside any money. And I don't go out and blow that money. I reinvest it into another house or paying down an equity line of credit. So I really don't budget for major repairs. That house had a new roof on it. So, the 2 major things I look at are the roof, the electrical, and the HVAC. And if they're good, all these other repairs, they're not going to be too much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. All right. So you've got a lot of cash flow coming in every month. So I think what you're saying is that you can cover most anything that will come up with your cash flow from all your rentals.
Yeah, so that cash flow from that house might go to cover another mortgage or equity line of credit on another house.
Yeah.
And you just keep repeating that process. And I think some people call this BRRRR, but it's with home line equity.
All right. So I guess I just want to, I'm just a little bit nervous that someone's going to hear this and think, oh, I don't need to budget any money for repairs. But, with your situation, I think it makes sense that anything that's going to come up on your properties, you're going to be able to handle it because your properties are mainly free and clear, or you have a little bit of debt on a home equity line. But I mean, you generate a lot of extra cash every month. So you can pay for anything that comes up. And then also, I assume you probably still have a W-2 job?
Yeah, that's all correct. And make sure your listeners know that if you're starting out, definitely save that money for that major expense if something happens. But I just feel like I'm at a place where I can see what's going on. I know my houses. And I do have a W-2 that I can fall back on, which is a huge comfort and a safe place for me.
If you want to see more about what Tom is doing with his rentals, you can follow him on Instagram or YouTube. I've got links to everything on my website. You can find it all at rentalincomepodcast.com/episode 387. I'd like to thank today's sponsor for making this episode possible. It's Chaley Ridge from Ridge Lending Group. Chaley is a nationwide lender, and her specialty is helping investors finance rental properties. She has a ton of different loan programs, and she can find something customized to you for your situation. If you want to find out more, or you want to set up a time to talk to Chaley personally, just reach out to her. You can track her down at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's RIDGE lendinggroup.com, NMLS 42056. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Make sure you follow the show. We put out new interviews every single Tuesday, and if you're following the show, you'll get notified as soon as the next episode comes out. My name is Dan Lane, and this has been the Rental Income Podcast.